The Antiquities Act has been widely used to preserve most of the cherished landmarks and pristine areas for the last 100 years. And as the clock ticks and we go into the next century, we must be a little careful. Mr. President, the big president back in Washington looks over 300 million people in the United States, but he has the sole authority to deal with some of these actions. So this resolution urges Congress to pass S-4-3-7, the Improved National Monument Designations Process Act, to basically have more public process. And in a democracy, we like public process. We don't want one man or one woman to have sole discretionary authority over us. And if we take a look, Mr. President, at the history of this, we go back to President Taft, who was well-meaning. Over 100 years ago, he selected Sitka first in Alaska, the center of the state, Mr. President, at the time. And it was nice to have that notoriety, and it's been appreciated at Little Totem Park. But as you fast forward, Coolidge targeted Glacier Bay. We ended up losing our fishermen out of there. We ended up losing our village sites out of there. We ended up having to get permission to go into the bay. We ended up losing the water rights that the state has in Glacier Bay. We, fast forward on to President Wilson. He dealt with Old Kassan. We go on down the list to FDR, again back in Glacier Bay, and increased the scope. Enlarged Sitka, Truman. I think that's the only thing growing in Sitka at the time, Mr. President. And then, of course, as mentioned, President Carter targeted numerous areas. I don't want to read the list. It just goes on quite a ways. So it's not, Mr. President, it's not the point of who the actual president was. I'd like to have the Senate concentrate a little bit on the time frame. It's over 100 years now, and the process hasn't slowed down. At some point, the state needs to be left alone so we can mature and develop our resources. It makes it very difficult when we have basically what I view as a lack of public process and the sole discretion sitting in the President of the United States to exercise the Antiquity Act authority over a small state and population like Alaska and restrict our ability. Those areas that I have read off earlier have not been altered or destroyed by the people that live here. Frankly, I believe that if they weren't even added, there wouldn't be much difference today. Clearly in Glacier Bay, you'd have some commercial fishermen in there. You wouldn't have a town the size of Juneau in there. You wouldn't have one the size of Anchorage or Ketchikan or Sitka, or you wouldn't even have a village in there. So I think it's incumbent upon us, Mr. President, to voice our objection to not having a thorough public process to protect the access that the state of Alaska deserves into these real estate areas around the state. And I urge the Senate to support this resolution going back. Again, it's not a issue of what political philosophy an individual president has or does not have. The issue is a 100-year trend, and it's not changing. And if we don't stand up for ourselves and ask for a change, we could get up someday our descendants, and the only thing left is Elder Rock and Lincoln Rock in Southeast. Those are the two nastiest weather areas in Southeast. Nobody wants them. Even the windmills get blown flat. So I am concerned about this trend, and I'd like the Senate to support this, and we probably will be at this for several decades till we get the federal government to back off a little bit. Thank you, Mr. President.